A new report says credit card debt in America is at its highest level since 2009, the year the economy faced the worst downturn since the Great Depression. I'm joined now by Robert Harrow, a senior credit card analyst at ValuePenguin, the research firm that compiled the report. And Robert, revolving debt, which is a fancy term for credit card debt, was at $935 billion in December of last year, compared to $922 billion in 2009. So what's going on here?
I think American consumers are really changing the way they pay for things. While cash payments and debit card payments tended to be more popular in past years, really people are switching to paying for things with their credit cards. And I think that's really driving this increase in credit card debt. Consumer spending is also up, which I think, again, goes in line with what I'm saying is if people are paying for more products with credit cards, they tend to increase their balance as a result.
But gas prices are so low. I mean, you would think that people have more money to pay off their debt, but not so, according to your report.
Oh, it's certainly, economic conditions are definitely improving, but consumer habits aren't. And that's really what it comes down to. Even if people tend to have more in their pocket to pay off their debts, they might be more inclined to make purchases they can't afford. And again, a credit card allows them to do that. It gives them that extra wiggle room to really buy something they might not be able to afford to pay off at the end of the month. And that kind of mentality and those kinds of bad habits are what drives this increase.
Your report also showed that those ages 45 to 54 had the highest amount of debt compared to other age groups. We're talking $9,000 a household. Now, is this because people in this age group, maybe they're supporting kids in college and elderly parents, so they're sort of sandwiched in between the two?
Exactly, yeah. That's what we're seeing. If you talk to people in that age group and how their finances break down and how they budget, they tend to have a lot more expenses than a 20-year-old who's just paying for rent, his utilities. A lot more financial responsibility comes down on them, and that's what drives them to really offset some of the day-to-day costs with a credit card.
And if you're in debt, I mean, how do you get out of it? I mean, are there certain strategies that are better than others?
Definitely. Budgeting is one thing I highly recommend. Again, just because you have a $5,000 line of credit doesn't mean you can afford to spend $5,000 worth of things within a month. Really, people shouldn't confuse their line of credit with their available budget. So really sitting down and figuring out what purchases you can afford and which you can't can go a really long way towards not getting trapped in that debt cycle and sort of falling into making minimum payments month to month.
Because if you put something on a credit card, I mean, it doesn't just sit there, interest accrues.
Exactly, yeah. While we see a lot of banks offer deferred interest cards and promotions that promise you to not have to pay interest for 21 months or 15 months, what have you, that doesn't mean it won't eventually catch up to you. And that's, again, comes back to that mentality, which is if you think you can't afford something, don't buy it. Just because you don't have to pay interest on it or just because you can defer paying by 2 months, 3 months, you can't predict what your financial situation will look like in those 21 months or those 6 months. So if something were to come up, you really need to know whether you'll have the finances to pay it off completely.
So does the debt that all of America is in right now, does that worry you? Are you confident that they'll be able to pay it off in due time?
That's very hard for me to, I guess, predict. Given the way things are going and economic conditions are definitely improving, we saw this with the Federal Reserve raising interest rates. They feel confidence in the U.S. economy. So also if you look at charge-off rates of banks, which is, again, the amount of loans or the percentage of loans a bank is determining they're unlikely to collect back on, those rates are actually decreasing. So people aren't defaulting on debts despite credit card debt getting larger. All right. So that's some good news.
Robert Harrow from ValuePenguin, thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
From Main Street, I'm Scott Gamm in New York.